Good evening. As you know, last time we were looking at the deliberate leader. We're looking at the deliberate leader, and this is part of my 12 Ds of world-class leadership. And I really believe this series is so powerful. The deliberate leader, I was chatting to Sipo, I think in terms of our complete church messages that we've done, I think it's been the most viewed already, and we did it just a few weeks ago. And so I'm really excited, and I've been praying into this quite a bit. And this is the second one now. It's the dialoguing leader. And what's powerful about this is that you can apply these principles, what I'm going to cover with you tonight, to yourself as a leader. You can apply it to yourself as a husband. You can apply it relationally as a husband or wife. You can apply it to yourself as a leader in the community. It's the art of dialogue. And I believe that this is one of the greatest qualities a leader can have, mastering the art of dialogue. You see, what happens is debate is 100% advocacy and 0% when it comes to inquiry, right? That's what debate is like. It's 100% advocacy. What's advocacy? When you're pushing your own point, right? When you're pushing something, when you're pushing an agenda. Debate is 100% that and 0% inquiry. But dialogue is 50% inquiry and 50% advocacy. So you still want people to know your story, which is important, right? We don't want to lose our voice. But at the same time, you want to inquire. So that's the basis of this particular talk. When teams master this, when leaders master this, it literally takes you to another level. And I'm really hoping that as I take you through this process, you'll embrace it, you'll listen to the message again, and you'll apply it. I want to encourage you to also teach these principles, because when you teach something, you retain it, okay? And I know quite a number of people are missing tonight, but that's okay. They'll catch up via the audio or the video. So the first affirmation of a dialoguing person is, during meetings, I do more listening than talking. How many of you can say that? During meetings, I do more listening than talking. Do you know what the principle here is? The principle here is the person who speaks second is more influential than the person who speaks first. Because if I wait to hear what you have to say, and then only after that do I speak, I'm now drawing from the fodder of what you've said. I'm mixing it in with what I want to propose to you. You're more likely to listen to what I have to say if I have listened to you first. There's that reciprocal nature of listening, isn't there? Right? People will only listen to you when you've demonstrated that you're willing to also listen to them to some extent. Okay? The other thing about being really a good listener is that the person leaves your presence feeling more significant as a human being. Real listening is where someone leaves your presence feeling more significant as a human being. Q, can you just move one down, please, so I can see your face? Thank you. Tabs is like in front of you. Cool. All right? That's the power of listening. And you're not just listening to respond or to reply. You're listening to really understand. You're extremely curious about what the person has to say. All right? That's the art of listening. So during meetings, I do more listening than talking. How many of you can say that's true concerning you? And let me just say something. Being quiet in a meeting doesn't mean you're listening. You see, some people assume that because they're quiet, then they're a good listener. No. You can be quiet and disengaged. Right? You can be quiet and detached. Okay? And let me just say something about quietness. There's nothing wrong with being a quiet person. There's a problem when you're shy. Because shyness has to do with anxiety. Shyness is when you kick yourself after a meeting because you're saying, I wish I had said that. I wish I had said that. Quietness is when you do it by choice. When you're choosing, you know what? I'm going to just listen and I'm going to be quiet. I don't want to take over. And you're comfortable in that space. Many people will say to me, Paul, I'm a processor. And I just process a lot in meetings. And then afterwards, someone just says something quicker than I have thought it. And then I kick myself and think to myself, but I had that point, but I had that point. And I say to some people, you know what? Sometimes the draft version is okay. Sometimes we want to hear the draft version of your viewpoint. Those of you who are quiet and you want to perfectly process something, and then you only speak once it's perfectly processed. We end up not really getting to know who you are because of your perfectionism, which is often the cause of it. During meetings, I do more listening than talking. If you struggle in terms of listening skills, make a decision that you're going to apply the 10-minute rule to your life, the 10-minute rule. So in conversations, just give yourself that 10-minute rule where you know you're a big talker and you just say, you know what, I want to listen and draw out this person for 10 minutes. And then it's a goal you have, right? You can apply that in personal relationships. When I work with couples, I'll often say, you know what, guys, just practice it. This week, just listen to each other. I was counseling a couple recently, and the wife spoke, and we were really listening for quite some time. Then the husband began to speak, and he had barely gone into his narrative, and the wife was coming, no, he's lying, no. And I just said, you see why you have these problems, right? We listened to you, you know? But now you're not listening to your husband. Okay? During meetings, I do more listening than talking, right? The next affirmation, during interactions with others, rather than trying to have all the answers, I like to ask questions that get to the heart of the matter. I like to ask questions that get to the heart of the matter. In my circle of friends, we've got this joke where I say to them, I'm the best question asker I know. And I know that there have been certain people who consider themselves great question askers, like Pastor Wimbai over there, all right? And she is brilliant, I must say. But I want to say this. When you ask someone a question that they've never been asked before, you get them to think about things they've never thought of before. And when someone thinks about something that they've never thought of before, you get them to end up saying things they've never said before. And when they say things they've never said before, because your tongue is a rudder, they end up doing things that they've never done before. All right? And that's the power of asking people questions that they've never been asked before. Right? I want to encourage you, and you're going to get these slides, by the way, so you'll get all of this. But if I say something that just jumps out at you where you feel like, yes, just take it down. But this is a very important point here. During interactions with others, rather than trying to have all the answers. See, a lot of us as leaders, we place ourselves under a lot of pressure to have all the answers. Have you noticed that? Okay? We place ourselves under so much pressure to have all the answers. I was coaching someone just the other day in one of the banks, and this lady said to me, you know what, Paul? One of my subordinates, she often will come to me, and she came to me the other day, and she said, you know what? This is the issue. What should I do? And I told her, you know what? Can you give me some time? Can I respond to this in a while? And then this subordinate, who was quite a strong character, wonderful person, said, that's what you always say, but sometimes I need the answers now. And as I coached this individual, I said to her, you know what? You don't have to, as a leader, have all the answers now. You see, sometimes we put under a lot of pressure. And the skill and the art is sometimes to turn it around and to actually ask the person more than 2 questions deep. I always say that, don't I? Must always ask people more than 2 questions deep as a leader. Because sometimes the fruit of asking them questions is greater than the fruit of having the answers. You see, sometimes when you have the answer and you share it with someone, guess what happens? You might look clever in the short term, but in the long term, you're enabling dependency, aren't you? You see, it takes leadership character to sometimes, yes, you've got the answer, but to sometimes not even give it. And to ask the person more than 2 questions deep and get them to come up with an answer for themselves. You know, the Bible is so powerful and says that it's the glory of a king. It's the glory of kings to search out a matter. So we want to empower people as leaders to search out matters for themselves. And then I said to this particular lady, I said, do you know that at the start of this session, You asked me a question on quite a major issue. Did you notice that I didn't give you all the answers? I gave you a few answers, but you know that I've got a whole lot of questions I can ask you about that particular thing that is bothering you right now. And I started asking questions. And I said, this situation that's bothering you, if you were to fast forward a year down the line from now, October 2019, and you were to look back on this situation, how would you feel about it? And guess what she said? She said, I would have forgotten about it. Now, that is a powerful question to ask her. And I said to her, can you see the power of this? That question is very useful when you're overwhelmed by something. Okay? Fast forward a year from now, if you look back on this situation, how will you feel about it? She said, I would have forgotten about it. Then I went on to ask her a few more questions. I said, you're very bothered about this situation. Do you think person X and person Y are also as bothered about this situation? Why do you think it's bothering you so much? So I started to ask a series of questions, and that was empowering in itself. Okay? So you ask questions that get to the heart of the matter. That's what great leaders do. Okay? Often when our children ask us questions, we're under pressure to have the answer. Right? Sometimes it's important to ask someone a question that goes straight to the person's heart. I love the way Jesus would sometimes do that. Someone would ask him a question and he didn't answer directly because he knew people's heart. And he was able to just ask them another question. And then the person is almost like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? Okay? So I want to encourage you, ask God to help you to ask powerful questions. Okay? I like to make others feel comfortable at the start of a meeting. Someone who's truly a dialoguing leader is very good at this. You make people feel comfortable at the start of a meeting. What does that mean? What does that entail? Number one, sense of humor. Sense of humor. Use your humor. You know when we're having that small talk at the start of a meeting, use your humor. You know that a sense of humor is a leadership quality. A sense of humor is not the same as cracking a joke. You can crack a joke, but have a bad sense of humor. You see, the person with a good sense of humor isn't the one always saying the funny things. Sometimes they're the ones who are laughing at the funny things. Sometimes a sense of humor is about laughing at yourself. Sometimes it's about using shock tactics where you speak out what everyone else is whispering. If you study comedy and you look at those movies where you're always packing out laughing, sometimes you're laughing not because what they said was funny. You're just shocked that someone will actually say that thing. Have you noticed that? Okay? Do you know that if you get people to laugh at the start of a meeting, what does laughter do? It releases those happy hormones, doesn't it? Your oxytocin, your dopamine, all those things, those feel-good hormones. It releases them, and people then feel more confident, and then people also feel more relaxed. So laughter is so powerful, and it's a leadership quality. They actually did some tests. They did some research on leadership, and they found that it's true that leaders have a good sense of humor. They actually got high-performing star leaders to speak in front of a group, and then they got average people to do the same thing. And guess what they found? They found that the high-performing star leaders got 4 times as many laughs out of the crowd than the average guys did. Okay? And guys, a sense of humor is a sense, so it can be developed. And what I've noticed is a lot of people will say, when I've coached them on this, they'll say, Paul, you know what, I'm not like that. I have to really try. I don't have a good sense of humor. But throughout the session I had with them, they would be laughing about various things. And I would catch them laughing. And I'd say, can you see you've got a good sense of humor? Can you see what you did at the start of the session? You were laughing at yourself about this. You were laughing at yourself about that. You've got a good sense of humor, right? So that's very important to use your sense of humor to make people feel comfortable at the start of a meeting. Why is it important to make people feel relaxed? Because some people who are invited don't know their purpose in that meeting. Have you ever gone to a meeting where you may be chairing it, you may be leading it, or just attending, and you notice that there's someone who's there and they're a bit confused. They're not too sure why they were invited. Ever had that? Or it's a junior person who kind of is not too sure. Maybe you've been in these situations where you're not too sure, are you allowed to speak in this meeting or not? You know, you're kind of wondering, is this meeting above my pay grade? Right? Will people think I'm being arrogant if I say anything? You see, a good chairperson of a meeting will actually state at the start of the meeting why certain people have been invited. They'll say, it's wonderful having Kume here. You know, we just wanted to bring her financial skills and that combo she has in terms of technology and finance. So we're really looking forward to her contribution today. And then it's really, really great having Tendai over here today because he's really going to bring in his experience in such and such an industry. Then the person feels welcome. They feel, oh, I'm significant. I matter. Does that make sense? If you don't do that, you'll find that the first half of your meeting, you've got people who are insecure and they're not actually adding value. Another reason why it's very important to make people feel comfortable at the start of the meeting is sometimes you have to detox people. Because very often people are coming from another meeting. We all have back-to-back meetings, don't we? So they rush in from another meeting or another conversation, and guess what? They're bringing in their baggage. And so you then say something to them, and then you're wondering, why is this person reacting like that? It's because they haven't detoxed from the previous meeting. So someone who masters the art of dialogue, they know how to settle people. And you know what? You can apply this principle when you get back home at the end of the day, right? Where you don't dive into everything, but you can sit down with your loved ones and touch base. How are you doing? How was everything? Right? What opportunities did you have today? Oh, what energized you today? You ask more than 2 questions deep, you settle them. They end up offloading, and then you get into the conversation that you want to get. If you just dive in and you say, why didn't you do A, B, C, D? What will happen? The person will react, and they'll want to chew your head off, and then you get into a fight, and you're wondering what's going on here, right? Because you didn't detox. Great leaders are able to create that climate in a room where they help people to detox from previous meetings. The other thing is you want to know as a leader, where are my people at? I've been in situations where I'll have a coaching session with someone and I ask them how they're doing. Before I get into all the detail, I ask them how they're doing. Real life situations where someone will say to me, oh, over the weekend, my boyfriend was involved in a car accident, and we're not too sure whether he'll ever be able to walk again. Okay? You've got someone then talking about, oh, my sister died the other day. Oh, this happened. And I'm thinking to myself, if I hadn't touched base with these people, I could have cracked some silly joke. Right? So this is something to watch out for. Good dialoguers are very good at doing this. Okay? I intentionally inquire in a discussion before telling. Many people come from a background where they're used to telling. You know those people? They were the firstborn, or they are the firstborn, right? They're a prefect at school, okay? Captain of soccer team or rugby team, okay? They're just used to telling people what to do, right? We even see it in church, where some of them are CEOs in their business, or, you know, they're successful in terms of business, then they think they can walk into church and start commanding everyone, you know. Hey, pastor, this is how you should run the church. Hey, pastor. Then when you don't let them do that, they leave, okay? Because they don't know how to adjust, right? But it's important to understand, I intentionally inquire in a discussion before telling. Why is this important? I was in a situation a couple of weeks ago where I had a particular service provider and there was a bit of confusion around a particular thing. And the service provider shared with me their perspective, and it reached a point where they said, listen, I think maybe just speak to my boss, the owner of the business, right? Just speak to them about it. So this was all telephonic. So we were now on speakerphone. The two of them were together, and I was on the other side of the call. The first thing I did, because I could have blasted the owner based on what the service provider was saying. But I said, can you just give me understanding of your perspective on our agreement? How do you understand our agreement? I was curious. And she began to describe, well, this is how I understand it. Yeah, carry on. And then this, and then this, and then this. Okay? And it was so easy for me to be able to then say, okay, so I think this is where things went wrong. I think there wasn't communication between person X and person Y. And then we carried on. I don't always get it right, but I knew then I needed to practice this principle. I intentionally inquire in a discussion before telling. Okay? I'm sure some of you have seen that many fights start when we don't do this, when we make assumptions. Okay? Often when I play my emotional trigger cards, some of you have seen them, right? One of the things that triggers a lot of people is when others make assumptions. How many of you are triggered by that? When someone just piles into you and starts saying all sorts of things, and you're thinking to yourself, why didn't you just ask? It's so unwise to tell before inquiring. All right? It's very unwise. I seek to hear other people's perspectives. This is the next principle. It's the next affirmation of a dialoguing leader. I seek to hear other people's perspectives. And it's very similar to the next one. I'm curious to hear other people's perspectives. You see, most people, they just tolerate other perspectives, don't they? But the dialoguing leader is so curious to hear other people's perspectives. And because of their curiosity, they actually seek out other people's perspectives. Have you noticed that you can tell when someone invites you to a meeting, but they're really inviting you to a meeting just to tell you what they think? And it's almost like a one-man show. And people complain about it, don't they? They say, this guy invites us to a meeting and we're all sitting there, especially when it's a very patriarchal type of organization. I don't know if you've been there. Everyone is sitting there and it's like a soliloquy. You know, those of you who did drama, okay? It's like this person just talking to themselves, like just talking, you know? So how curious are you to hear other people's perspectives? Now, curiosity comes from a heart that has two major things. A heart that is humble. In other words, you know that you don't know everything. If you're a know-it-all, you'll never be curious about other people's perspectives. There's no time for that, because I must just tell you what I think, right? So it comes from a humble heart. It also comes from a heart that wants to learn. Do you know that I can sit down with you, right? And even if I disagree with you on a particular matter, if I've got a heart that is consumed with learning, I still want to investigate. Why do you see things the way you do? Because there are probably many other people who share your perspective. That's what a dialoguing leader does. So I want to understand, because if I really want to influence you, I need to understand you, right? I need to understand your train of thought. I need to understand the logic of your argument. Does that make sense? Okay? How can you influence people that you don't understand? You know what's so sad? If you look at the dictators in the 20th century, if you look at the birth of communism in Russia and places like that, those guys studied the mindset of the people. And they influenced them because they understood how the people thought. Okay? Yet many of us today who are good leaders, who are leaders of integrity, it's almost like we just preach to people, but we're not pausing to listen to them, to understand them. And guys, again, this principle applies husband and wife, applies your teenage kids, applies how to understand your boss at work, right? I seek clarity from people before making a judgment about them. I seek clarity from people before making a judgment about them. This is a biggie, isn't it? With the same measure you judge, you will be judged. I was saying to my kids, as I was eating my supper earlier on, I said to them, you know what, guys? I'm noticing in your language, you've been talking down to certain people or about certain people, all right? You know, like you are better. None of us are better. That's what I said to them. I said, do you guys ever hear me insulting someone else? Do you ever hear me saying, I don't understand why that guy can't make money? And I said, you know why I never say that? I am what I am because of God's grace. God is the one who looks after us. God is the one who's shown us favor. And in any second, it can all go. I said that to them. I said, you guys want to do well in your exams, don't you? So don't insult other people. Don't say, that guy's useless. Yeah, oh no, that guy's not smart. Hey, no, that guy. Don't speak like that. Okay? And guys, the enemy's trap against us is to get us into a place of making judgments. Why? Because the judgment becomes a snare. Because there's that principle, which is actually a universal law, that with the same measure you judge, you will be judged. Okay? So it's very important. Now, here's an interesting thing about judgments. Often our judgments are very fixed. Have you noticed that? What do I mean by fixed judgment? A fixed judgment is where you've got a viewpoint concerning someone. So if my mindset is Q is lazy, right? You know what will happen? If 2 days later she comes with this detailed, comprehensive report, because my judgment is fixed about her, the first thing I'm going to think is, who helped her? Who did she outsource this to? Okay? And if you notice that we're always doing that about people, if you've decided that someone is lazy, you'll interpret everything they do from that perspective. And we do that very often with our loved ones, don't we? My husband, he doesn't put me first. I don't come first in his life. Every single thing he does, you'll view from that particular perspective. Okay? Happens a lot. So let's be careful about our judgments. I remember someone was sharing with me how they went for counseling, for marriage counseling, and one of the things they actually had to do was to make a list of all the judgments. And I've started doing that with some of the couples I'm working with, to make a list of all the judgments you've made concerning your spouse. And then next to those judgments, what I do is I get them to write out the counter arguments. So if one of the judgments is, she doesn't love my family, which is a common one I'm seeing in situations. She doesn't love my family. Ask the question, what else could be true? I remember dealing with a couple recently on this one. You ask the question, what else could be true? Oh, maybe she, and why do you say so? No, because she avoids them. She doesn't like spending time with them. Okay, there's a difference between she doesn't love my family and she doesn't like spending time with them. So let's unpack it. What else could be true? Oh, maybe she doesn't like spending time with them because she feels stressed out because they expect her to perform. Okay? What else could be true? Or maybe she doesn't speak their language. She's not competent in their language. So sometimes she struggles and then she feels mocked or belittled. What else could be true? Oh, okay, maybe she really wants to please them. And she feels that, you know what, she can't please them and she doesn't want to embarrass you. So she rather avoids. Can you see that there's so many different alternatives? But often when we make a judgment, it's like, she doesn't love my family. Fixed. I was dealing with this situation just a few days ago, counseling a couple. Okay? My boss is stingy. Why do you say he's stingy? He hasn't given me a raise in a long time. What else could be true? Do you know for sure that he hasn't been fighting for you behind the scenes? Okay? What else could be true? I hold back judgment when listening to people. See, what tends to happen is the moment you have those judgments, you won't listen to the person. What judgment does is it blocks dialogue. If I've already written you off and blacklisted you and decided this is you, and because you were like this last week, it means this week you're also like this, I'm not going to listen to you. One of the main reasons why we don't listen to people is we assume that this person is the same as they were last week. But people are always changing. How many of you have ever been in a situation where you feel like, you know what, sometimes at work, I'm put into a box. They put me into a box. I made a mistake 5 years ago, and they've kept me in that box. That's because of fixed judgments. They keep you in that box because they made a judgment about you, and they can't move from that judgment. Okay? So, I hold back judgment when listening to people. Another term for that is suspending judgment. Saying to yourself, let me first listen to the full story before I actually make a judgment about it. You see, sometimes we have to make a decision. Sometimes we have to make a judgment call. The problem isn't the judgment call. The problem is when our judgments are fixed. When people bring evidence that shows us, you're actually wrong, but we are immovable. We're set. That's when it becomes dangerous. Okay? In the court of law, you will see, I don't know what goes on in the judge's mind, but it's only after various things are presented that the judge then says, okay, this is the verdict. Do we do that in our conversations? Someone who's mastered the art of dialogue. This is what they practice. I hold back judgment when listening to people. I listen well even when I don't agree with someone. One of the marks of being a good listener is still continuing to listen even when you disagree with what someone is saying. You continue to listen even when you disagree with what the person is saying. Okay? And you start listening for other things. How many of you know that in a conversation you can listen not just to the conversation but the sub-conversation? So someone is speaking to you, but what's happening in the sub-conversation? What's going on in their heart? This person is saying horrible stuff. I hate you. I don't like you. You're terrible. What are you listening to? Instead of shutting down, say to yourself, sure, this person is really wounded. Sure, I think this person is really protesting. Sure, I think this person is sharing with me this, but maybe it's linked to something else they've been through. Can you see you've already got a number of questions? And so after they've shared those things with you, you now begin to ask them these questions. You say to the person, tell me, this thing seems to be really bothering you a lot. Is it just this particular incident, or is it linked to other things? Is this your first time experiencing this frustration, or is this a pattern in my behavior that's frustrating you? Can you see what happens? The moment you demonstrate that type of curiosity, do you know what it does to the person? They calm down. They actually calm down. It's very difficult for someone who's in an escalated situation called emotion dysregulation, someone who's escalated like that. It's very difficult for them to stay in that zone if they're being asked those types of questions. Can you imagine someone shouting back at you when you're saying, are there any other examples of this you can give me? They're not going to start saying, yes, the other day, and in the other month. They're not going to do that, okay? Because what's happening is you're shifting them from heart to head. You're shifting them from a place where they're just being emotional to a place now where they actually have to think about what they're saying. You see, that's the power of curiosity. I listen well even when I don't agree with someone, right? You get them to that place. Let me just say something. When someone is in a place of emotion dysregulation, the last thing to do is to say to them, calm down. Why? Because they'll now try to show you that, no, this is not a calming down situation. It's very serious. I'm upset. And then they become even louder. Okay? So the trick is to empathize with them, to demonstrate empathy, which we'll talk about in a while. Okay? Another thing is a very powerful affirmation. I can restate something someone has said to me even when I don't agree with what was said. Have you noticed that when you agree with someone, that's when you're like, yeah, and you start saying it for them. But when you disagree with someone, sometimes you even forget what the person had said because you've already shut down. And very often we think we disagree with the person, but we only disagree with a portion of what they've said. Or maybe it was even their choice of words. They said one thing and they used a word out of context, and that's really what we disagree with. But then we become polarized. I disagree with you. Okay? Now, are you able to restate what they've said even when you don't agree with them? So in other words, they say something nasty to you. Are you able to say, okay, I just want to make sure that I understand what you're saying. So what you're saying is you feel like I'm really lazy because I haven't been helping around the house. And you work too. And so you come home and you expect me to do a bit of work, but I'm just sitting on the couch. And it really irritates you and you wish you had married someone else. Is that what you're saying? I just want to make sure I understand you. Okay? And do you know what? Do you know what often happens? When someone hears their words coming back, what happens? They then readjust. I've had situations where I'll say to someone, okay, so is this what you're saying? So then I restate it. And they say, no, that's not what I'm saying. Okay? So it's very important to be able to restate what they've said. And you want to listen with a listening ear that is prepared to restate what the person has said. Do you know what this also does? It makes the person feel heard. Especially if the person has been rambling on and on, taking you to the countryside, over that lake, over that dam, through that canal, overseas, through the immigration. They've been taking you far with the story. And you just want to, for your sake also and the sake of the conversation, you actually want to summarize what they've said. Okay? It gives them an opportunity to also qualify what they've said. It also gives them an opportunity to say, you know what, that probably wasn't the best choice of words. Let me adjust. No, I'm not really saying I want you to have married someone else. I'm just meaning I feel like Okay? So that's very important. Another affirmation of the dialoguing leader is, I continue to seek clarity whilst someone is giving me negative feedback. You know what the purpose of feedback is? When someone gives you feedback, it's not for you to be defensive. You get feedback so you can learn and you can grow. That's the purpose of feedback, isn't it? So even if someone is giving you the feedback in a way that you don't like, don't start lecturing them about, hey, but the way you did it, you were judging, and then you were very short with me, and then you were very... If you're a dialoguing leader, you're extremely curious, and you want to learn and you want to grow. So you start off your day with the mindset of, I am looking for opportunities for growth. And if those opportunities come via feedback, and feedback that's sometimes quite critical, quite harsh, if you've already positioned yourself at the start of the day that I want to grow, I value growth, right? My desire for growth is way bigger than my fear of the rejection that comes with criticism. Okay? Then you receive it. You see? And here's the interesting thing. There's something called daran that I've mentioned to some of you before. And it's a process that we go through when it comes to landing feedback. I call it daran, by the way. It's my own acronym, okay? The first is denial. You're in denial. So someone shares something with you, and you're just in denial. And I always say to people, denial doesn't belong here. It's a long river in Egypt, okay? Then the second aspect is, you find that people, instead of actually moving on from denial properly, they then go to anger. And then sometimes they're angry with the messenger. Have you noticed that? And you're like, I'm just presenting the facts back to you, okay? And they get angry. Sometimes they're angry with themselves. So don't react to their reaction when you're giving them the feedback, okay? Sometimes they're actually just angry with themselves, especially if they're perfectionists who likes to do things properly. They're angry with themselves, and they take it out on you. I think you've seen it happening. Then the next stage is people rationalize. Can you see this is similar to the grief stages? Okay? People rationalize. So they'll say, yes, I did that, but you can understand. Yes, I did that, but you can understand my situation. Then afterwards, there's acceptance or agreement. They'll agree. They'll agree with what you're saying mentally, but there isn't change of behavior. And then in the final stage, it's new learning. That's the N. It's new learning. New learning. And true learning happens when you acquire knowledge with a resultant change of attitude and behavior. Okay? Can you see how this ties in with what I shared with you in the deliberate leader? Same principle. Now, You want to be someone who's seeking clarity while someone is giving you feedback. What does that actually look like? Instead of being in denial or anger, right, or rationalizing it away, what you actually do is you clarify it. So if you say to me, Paul, I don't like your shirt, instead of me saying, oh, what about yours? I also don't like yours, which is what a lot of people do, right? I'll say, oh, is it the color or is it the style? Is it the use of the shirt? Just give me understanding. Is it how I'm using it? Do you prefer it in other contexts? Does that make sense? Okay? Whenever someone gives you feedback, seek clarity. Then you find that sometimes their feedback wasn't as nasty as you thought. You know what? I didn't like your message the other day, that sermon you preached. Oh, what was it about? What didn't you like? Oh, it was just hard-hitting. I felt so uncomfortable because it really hit home. Oh, okay. Right? Now, if you hadn't sought clarity, you might have just thought, no one likes my messages, no one likes my messages. Or you might have fired back and said to the guy, and what about yours? Where are your messages? Let's see your YouTubes. Send them to me, and I also want to listen to your stuff. And then the person says, no. Actually, it was a powerful message for me. I'm saying I didn't like it. My flesh didn't like it. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay? I see feedback as a gift and show appreciation for it. You see, when you thank someone for feedback, when you see feedback as a gift and not an insult and not rejection, everything changes. When you see feedback as a gift, you actually go out looking for it. Have you noticed that the people who receive feedback more easily than others are often the ones who are proactive about it? If you're afraid of feedback, I want to encourage you, go and actually seek it out. Go to people and actually say, what do you think we should do differently? And just be careful how you ask the question. Because if you say, so did you like it? It's very difficult for people to say, no, we actually didn't. Right? But if you go to people and you say, what do you think we can work on and tweak? They feel, hey, we can also give input. Okay? They feel they're a part of what's going on. Okay? And by the way, when you show appreciation for feedback, guess what happens? The people will give you more. When you become defensive, people vote with their feet. They'll be like, this person will never change. I speak to people and you'll hear them saying, Paul, nowadays in meetings we don't talk. This is in one organization. The reason we don't talk is our boss, we know he'll always just shoot you down, whatever you say, and maybe embarrass you. So there's no point actually, We just sit there and we like, okay, we let him speak and then we just carry on. Okay? You don't want to be a leader like that because you become the emperor with no clothes, right? Those of you who used to read that book when you're growing up. I value feedback as a source of learning. You know what's interesting about learning? A lot of people only have one mode of learning. So some people are strong readers. Other people are strong at listening to messages, audio. Other people are strong at watching something, But they limit themselves to just one mode, right? I want to encourage you. If you want to maximize on your learning, have multiple modes. So one of the questions I like asking people when I'm coaching them is, what are your sources of learning? Right? I first ask them, what's your learning strategy? What do you need to learn? What's your growth step? In the next few months, what do you need to master? And someone might say assertiveness, or they might say stakeholder management. I need to manage senior stakeholders. Paul, I'm really confident with my people, at my level, but it's the senior guys I'm intimidated by. So they mention these things. Then I say, what is your learning plan? And in that learning plan, they have to come up with their various sources of learning. So they're multiple. Oh, I'm going to get someone to mentor me and be a role model for me in this area. Oh, I'm going to actually see, Paul, what are the best books on this particular topic? And I'll read. Oh, what are the best messages or video clips or TED Talks on this? Then while I'm driving, I can be listening to them. Okay? Oh, I also need to ask my guys for feedback. And I would like them to actually have an accountability thing with me so that whenever I'm not effectively running a meeting, they actually give me feedback on that so I can learn and I can grow. Can you see what's actually happening there? You've got various sources of learning. Okay? I value feedback as a source of learning. That's the dialoguing leader. I'm good at finding common ground in my interactions with others. This is interesting for me. You know that when it comes to conflict, there are a few major sources of conflict. Number one, you can have conflict with someone because of different goals, different tasks or goals. So I want to go to Durban. You want to go to Bloemfontein. There's only one vehicle, and there's a limited budget when it comes to fuel. So where do we go? Sometimes there's conflict because of that. Other times there's conflict, and very often, conflict because of process. So we want to go to the same place, but you want to fly there and I want to drive there. Okay? Methodology. And this is so important because often in conflict we get polarized. And I think you're my enemy and you think I'm your enemy. You're in the green corner, I'm in the red corner. Instead of actually just pressing pause and saying, you know what, we're on the same page. We both want to go to Bloom. You just want to fly there and I want to drive there. Often a lot of conflict will be resolved when we understand the source of conflict. Is it because of vision, goal, task? Or is it actually because of process and methodology? Husband and wife arguing. You want to send your child to those fancy private schools. I think government education is okay. I went to something worse than a government school, and look how I turned out. And your spouse says, yeah, look how you turned out. Okay. All right. Right. But you have conflict there, but you can actually just find common ground and actually say, you know what, do we both want our kids education? Yes, we both do. Okay, let's think about it. What constitutes a great education? A, B, C, D. What schools out there will give us that? So you begin to have a conversation where you find common ground. And you know what we discover? We actually have more similarities than differences concerning a number of these things. But we tend to fight just about that one thing we disagree about. Have you noticed that? Great leaders in a meeting in the workplace will literally step in and help people to see their commonalities. See, often you're the one who's watching like it's a tennis match, you know, Djokovic versus Federer. It's like you're watching like this, and you're there, and you're the peacemaker. The great dialoguer is actually able to look and see, hey, they've got this in common, and then they speak it out. And that's the ministry of reconciliation. And I think it can be so powerful. Another source of conflict, remember I said to you there's tasks and goals, right? There's process or methodology. Another common one is actually interpersonal dynamics. So we engage in conflict because I don't like how you spoke to me. You finished off my sentence for me. You were shouting at me. You raised your voice. Have you noticed that a lot of times we fight about that, the interpersonal style? And the issue is a small issue. That's why a lot of arguments and fights, they start off with a very small issue, and within 15 minutes, they've escalated into a fist fight. And you're wondering what's going on. And very often it's because of the interpersonal dynamic. Because you press pause and you say to yourself, but what are we actually fighting about? And then you need that dialoguing leader to be the one who actually says, let's just calm down. What's really going on here? Right? Let's just both, not just you calm down. Let's just, what's going on? We've escalated. You know, when a conversation escalates, it was here, now it's here. But I thought it was just about whether I wore a blue jacket or a green one. But now it's escalated. And we're fighting because you're saying that I don't look good enough for you. And you don't look good enough for me. But I look after myself more than you. And I'm always smelling nice and you smell horrible. I'm sure there's some people who have those fights. I'm just making up stuff. But the point I'm making is it escalates. Yet it escalated because of interpersonal dynamics, how you were speaking to me, the choice of words that you were using. Then the fourth reason why we engage in conflict is status issues. That's the issue of who's in charge. I've shared this with you before, well, some of you at least, right? My kids have wanted to live in a particular estate, a very expensive estate, where we think the houses are overpriced, but it'll be a very convenient estate to live in for various reasons. But what is interesting is they like the idea of us moving there. So sometimes what happens is they've got friends who might have sold a house there. Oh, our friend so-and-so, they're moving out. And they would have been to that house. Then they start having an argument amongst each other saying, okay, I booked so-and-so's room. Yeah, I'm going to get so-and-so's room. No, I'm going to get so-and-so's room. Do you know that argument ends very quickly when I step in and I say, guys, if we ever get that house, that's not going to be your decision. Who's going to have which room? Boom, it's over. Right? A lot of times in the workplace, in churches, in teams, soccer teams, rugby teams, there's conflict because it hasn't settled in people's hearts who's in charge. It hasn't settled. In church dynamics, when it's clear about authority, who's in charge, etc., things work out really nicely. But you'll notice that a lot of people don't last that long when they're unclear about that. People who can't be in authority and under authority. You know what I'm talking about? They don't last. You see? It's the same in the workplace. One person shared with me a story, and I was talking about this principle. And they said, yeah, we're in a situation where we have all these discussions about what we're going to do. We agree. And then someone goes on leave. And then when they come back, they realize, people did the opposite of what they were supposed to have done. And Paul, you're right. It was an issue of status. There wasn't clarity about who's in charge, or people didn't accept who's in charge. Have you ever been in a situation where you're leading a team and you've got a subordinate, maybe someone who was once a peer of yours? Often this is an issue, isn't it? And sometimes you have to have the difficult conversation with them to actually say, listen, I need your support. In order for us to be effective as a team, I need your support. Then if they still do it again, you know what? Let's talk about this. Because something is not working here. It feels like you haven't accepted my leadership for whatever reason. So in order for things to work, one of us has to leave this team. And that person is not going to be me. The people who destroy teams, I'm telling you right now, are people who don't understand status. That in a team, we're not all equal per se. We're equal as human beings, but there's a leader who calls the shots. There's certain people who haven't survived certain soccer clubs because they thought they were bigger than the club. And there's certain managers where it's well known that they don't entertain that. And the people have been exited. They would criticize their teammates publicly. You know, teammates don't like that. So the principle I want to share with you is this one. Dialoguing leaders are good at finding common ground when it comes to interactions with others. They're good at being able to say, but we're on the same team, aren't we, Tabs? But we both want a successful department, don't we, Tabs? Okay, I think we're on the same page. And then you build on that. Does that make sense? And what I shared with you about those 4 areas, those sources of conflict in relationships, when you figure out where is the conflict coming from, it's easier to then deal with it. Is it conflict because of vision? Then you deal with it. Is it conflict because of process? Then you deal with it. Is it conflict because of interpersonal style? Then you deal with it. Is it conflict because of status? Then you address it. Okay? Before establishing the way forward during a meeting, I usually integrate what various people have said. Mumbai is very good at this, right? Very good. There are a number of people who are good at this. The art of literally pulling together what various people have said, integrating it, and summarizing it. You know what that does to the people in the meeting? Everyone feels they were heard. Everyone feels their point counts. I was in a situation doing a workshop a few days ago, and I made a point of remembering what certain people were saying. And much later on about day 2 or day 3, I then quoted what they had said, hours after they had said it. And being the sunshine yellow I am, I said, how did you feel? The fact that I remembered what she said. I felt so good, Paul. I felt really good. Okay? It's the art of integrating what people have said in a meeting because they feel, yes, you were listening. And you know what ends up happening? They then talk more. Have you noticed that? They then talk more because they feel like I was heard. That's the art of listening, what it does. Have you ever really listened to someone and you almost feel like you're peeling off like layers of an onion? It's a bit like that. There's some people, when you start speaking to them, the first few minutes, they're very surface level. But have you noticed what happens the next few minutes? Ooh, ooh. The next few minutes after that, ooh, ooh, all comes out. I still remember going on dates with my wife, and she was a bit like that. We'll be talking about various things, and I think, okay, cool, this is where she's at. And it was only on the dessert stage where she starts bringing out stuff and so on. I started thinking to myself, oh, okay, all right. 45 minutes later, the stuff is really coming out, right? I've noticed it with some of you, for example, right? I noticed with Sister Chili, it's like the first time I met her, she was quite guarded and quite, then afterwards she realized, and at subconscious level, she might not have been conscious of it, but she realized that this pastor really listens and really cares and is really curious, right? And will send me material and so on. And what happens? Now when I speak, exactly. Now I couldn't even start this session because she was like, there's something I wanted to tell you. There's something I wanted to ask you. And then there's this other thing. I'm like, okay, guys, let's start. But let me tell you something. That doesn't just happen. It only happens when the person listens to you. I've had situations where I'm coaching people and they'll say, and they'll pour out stuff to me. And I actually start thinking, maybe this person is just a very open person. And then they say to me, Paul, just know I'm only like that with you. With very few people am I like that. And I start realizing, oh, okay. Why did they open up? Now, for many of us, we do it professionally. We're paid to listen to people. But most people, their day jobs don't require too much listening. They're just doing numbers, just carrying on and so on. So they don't get to practice hours and hours and hours of listening to people. And that's why listening, guys, it's a practice, eh? It's a habit, the art of listening. Does that make sense? Okay. Integrate what various people have said. And then when you are proposing your idea and the way forward, people really feel like, sure, he's taken my little ideas into consideration. I'm enthusiastic about asking questions that get to the heart of the matter. So we've touched on this before, but I want to say something to you. Just watch this. I've got a friend, right, who's seated directly in front of me over there, okay? I'm not going to mention the name because we're recording this. And this friend shared with us recently about a particular leader moving on, right? Going on early retirement, right? So she shared this. Now, I don't know about you, but I've got a list of questions I want to ask her. You see, I could basically, when I next have a conversation with this particular friend of ours, right? I could just say, hey, so tell me, what happened? And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But I want to encourage you to ask creative questions because they give you such powerful fodder back that you would otherwise not get. Remember I said to you, dialoguing leaders make people feel comfortable at the start of the meeting. Don't just go up to someone and say, so, how was your weekend? That's a standard question people ask on Mondays, right, at work. So how was the weekend? If you're from Joburg with a Joburg accent, so how was the weekend? Right, like that. Don't just limit it to that. Someone who I was coaching, who knows I'm a pastor, said to me, so how was Sunday? It was an opportunity for me to say to the person, oh yes, I did a message on a biblical view of time management. Okay, so it was a few weeks ago when I preached on that. Can you see the power of that? If they just said, how's your weekend? Do you know what you do? If you ask someone a question in autopilot, often they respond in autopilot. Right? Think about it. On Mondays, you respond the same way to everyone. Too short. How's your weekend? Too short. Not even thinking about it. But when you ask people questions that get to the heart of the matter, when I sit down with this friend of ours, I want to sit down with her and I want to say, how did you feel when you first heard the news? And then if she struggles in terms of expressing emotion, I'll give her some ideas. And I'll say, did you feel relieved? Did you feel excited? Did you feel a sense of freedom, like a burden lift? Did you feel a sadness? Did you feel the relationship could have been different? I want to ask this friend of mine, what are your regrets? I want to ask this friend of mine, while this leader is still there and you're still working with them, is there any unfinished business? Are there any conversations you need to have with this person? What opportunities do you think are still there? Do you think this person is going to change between now and when they leave, now that they know they're leaving? Do you think this person who you might have written off as someone who's key in terms of your promotion, do you think maybe they might still be key because they're now leaving? Do you get what I mean? Because people change. The way you feel about this person leaving, has it been exactly the same from the time you heard the news? Or has it changed since? Have you had ups and downs? What have other people said to you? What comments have they said? Where do you feel you have to guard what your response is? Have you got a strategy concerning your response when people ask you about this person's departure? Can you see how there's so many questions, right? And because this friend of ours is a thinker, I'm sure they are processing all these things and they will have lots to say. Do you know what it will do? It makes the conversation richer. Does that make sense? Than just saying to someone, so, how's it going? Does that make sense? Okay. So, I don't just ask questions that get to the heart of the matter. I'm enthusiastic about it because I'm curious. I want to know. Oh, and by the way, just the cherry on top of the cake, I'm sure after I have that conversation with this friend of ours, I'm sure they'll feel like, sure, this person is really interested in my world. They've thought through stuff. You know, they've obviously fascinated. And the person will leave my presence feeling good. Does that make sense? Okay. So I want to encourage you, come up with questions. One of the things to do when you're building your network, it's a technique we use when we teach people on the art of networking. Always carry around with you, 15 feel-good questions. When you want to build your network, 15 feel-good questions. What's a feel-good question? A feel-good question is a question that results in the person feeling good. So feel-good question isn't, hey, so how's the divorce going? You know, I hear you thinking about getting divorced. How's that going? That's not a feel-good question. It's not something someone feels like talking about. Okay? A feel-good question is, you know what team that person supports. And hopefully their team did well. So for example, if they're a Man City fan, you can say, hey, you guys scored lots of goals. Hey, what do you think of Guardiola's tactics? They obviously will say something positive about the tactics. Okay? If the person is a Man United fan, you know, just do a bit of research and know that, then you go to them, hey, how did you feel about Rashford's last-minute goal? It'll be feel good. They'll smile. Charlton is already smiling, just the fact that I'm talking about it. Because I was with Charlton that morning, and he was like, no, Man United, it's not good to watch at the moment because we're not doing that well. But I know if I talk about it with them, it's a feel-good question. You see, do you know what our challenge is? Our challenge relationally with people is not so much having a conversation with people. It's starting the conversation. It's the icebreaker. People who are afraid of talking, people who are shy, it's not the fact that, once I'm in the conversation, it'll be tricky talking. Often it's, how do I break the ice? It's the feel-good questions. It's the feel-good questions. Okay? Major affirmation. People often respond to my questions by saying, so interesting, I've never been asked that before. And that's why I said to you, ask people questions that they've never been asked before. Think creatively. And the only way we can do that is by practicing, preparing, visualizing. Okay? Is Q good at that? Okay. Okay, it's fine. I'll answer at the end. I'll answer at the end for the sake of the recording. That's fine. Right? You ask them questions they've never been asked before. Okay? And you literally just go in and you find them coming out with a response. And they will remember you simply because the question was memorable. Why was it memorable? It was unusual. Okay? In my interactions with others, I practice active listening. In my interactions with others, I practice active listening. What is active listening? Active listening, the goal of it is to show the person that you're listening. You see, some people say, I'm listening. Don't worry, just because my eyes are closed doesn't mean I'm not listening. I'm listening. There are times when my wife and I would be tired and we'll be having a conversation and we'll be lying on the bed talking. And we're like, don't worry, you can carry on talking. I'm just resting my eyes. You can carry on, I'm just resting my eyes. Okay? Was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday. I was telling my wife a story. I was updating her on something. And I said, are you listening? And she was lying on the bed. She was tired. I think it was after her race or something. She says, no, I'm listening. Because she was going quite quiet. You know? And then I carried on talking. And then at a certain point, she was like, oh, I'm sorry, my love. I think I missed some of that. Okay, type of thing. And then later on that evening, she says, okay, that story you were telling me, okay, it's a bit blurry, it's a bit hazy. Can you start again, please? Okay. So I knew I had lost her. So what is active listening? Active listening is where I'm communicating to you that I am actually listening. Now, don't overdo it. You know, there's some people who overdo it. And again, if you're speaking to someone who's quite introverted and so on, don't be too much for them. You know, there's some people who are overwhelming, you know, just their presence. Okay? All you need to do in a gentle way is show the person that you're listening. How do you do it? Sometimes it's just by saying things like, okay, carry on. Yeah, okay. And what else? You're getting them to say more. It's an art of getting people to say more. Right? And it's good to actually have a script, to actually have certain statements or phrases that you use. Okay, can you just tell me a bit more? What does that do? Imagine we're having a conversation, you're talking. Okay, carry on. Can you tell me a bit more, please? See, most people, when they're speaking, they're thinking you want to hear less. But when you just say to someone, can you tell me more about that? And just be careful when you're asking people questions, when you're listening, try not to control the conversation. Because there's some people, they ask too many questions in one go, and you feel like they're interrogating you. They ask you a question, you've barely answered it, they're asking the next question. Okay? So don't ask too many questions in one go in the art of dialogue, right? So in my interactions with others, I practice active listening. Sometimes active listening is where you match the emotion of the other person. It's called behavioral matching. So if someone is excited, oh man, okay, oh wow. The last thing you want is you're full of excitement and someone is just looking at you in the blank face. That's good, Pastor Paul. Okay. Because I'll just think this person doesn't get me. We live on different planets. You know, that's how you feel. And you know what? It's actually a biblical principle. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Okay? You match the person's emotion. You get into their world. As Miriro is telling me a story, getting into her world. Sure, how did it feel? Sure, how did it feel? Okay? I remember I remember when you were sharing with me about the time when you were, what can we call it? Mugged, you know, when the guys came. I don't know if you guys know the story. I don't know if you mind me talking about it, okay? Where fairly recently, like literally a month and a half ago or so, she was having a jog. They're joggers, for those who don't know. And a guy literally came with a gun and asked for her phone. And her whole thing was, why didn't you just ask for my phone? Why did you have to actually point this gun where I'm literally thinking I'm going to be shot? Type of thing. And I still remember as she shared this story, she's a good storyteller herself. So I could visualize where it was, which corner it was. I'm sure I would have been asking more than 2 questions deep. She was then saying, because when they took her phone, she was like, so why are you taking my phone? And I was asking, weren't you afraid? I was caught, it's like I was watching this movie, 3D, everything. I'm like, but wait a minute, this guy has just pointed a gun at you and you're now asking him, why did you take my phone? I was in it with her. Right? And I'm sure she then could say more. Now imagine, sometimes people share stories like that are quite emotional, and you've got someone who's just got this blank look looking at you. She won't want to share. She'll be like, these guys don't understand. Let me just talk to other people. Let me go to that group. There are often these groups, of people who've been mugged. They'll get me. They'll feel me on this. Okay? During my interactions with others, I listen with empathy. This is so powerful. The quickest ways to get people to like you, remember I told you people buy from brands they like? One of the quickest ways to get people to like you, practice empathy. What is empathy? It comes from 2 Latin words, em and pathos. It literally means feeling into, wearing someone else's moccasins. Okay? I'm not saying I've been through what you've been through, but I'm feeling you on this. Okay? Now, there are different types of empathy. Some of you might have heard me share this before, right? The first one is emotional empathy. That's I feel you, okay? And this is a powerful affirmation. I like to give people around me emotional empathy. That's I feel you. So if I say, guys, I've got a migraine, and then you say, oh, Paul, is it above your eyes? Is it behind your head? Where is it? Ouch. How'd you carry on teaching with a migraine? Are you okay? I don't really have a migraine. I can see some of you already like, Nikki's like, oh, okay, can we get some? Okay, I'm actually fine. It was just an example. But the point is that I feel you. And if you notice that you're drawn to people who feel you, right? The second type of empathy is called cognitive empathy, which is I get you. I get you. And the affirmation for this is I like to give people around me cognitive empathy. This is the active listening. This is where I can say to Kume, I know where you're coming from. Okay, that's why you would do that. I'm following your logic. Yeah, no, knowing you, Kume, I know that would frustrate you. I see where you're coming from. And if you notice something, if I say to you, who's your best friend? You'll mention a couple of people, and you know what you will say about them? I'll say to you, why are they your best friend? What do you say? She gets me. He gets me. Paul, I'm not stressed out when I'm around that person because they just get me. They know where I'm coming from. I'm not saying I agree with you, but I follow your logic, right? That's a powerful tool to use, cognitive empathy. The third type of empathy, and this is the affirmation for it, I generously show the people around me empathic concern, which is I'm here for you. I am here for you. Empathic concern is if you need to go to the hospital because you're not feeling well and you have to take time off work, right? And your workmates basically say to you, don't worry, we'll cover for you, right? That's empathic concern. I'm here for you. We'll do the work for you. And we appreciate that, don't we? Now, let me ask you a question. What happens 3 days later you come back and no one asks you a follow-through question? No one asks you, so are you feeling better now? How do you feel? You feel confused, and you sometimes keep quiet about it because you're thinking to yourself, they were there for me, they covered for me, they worked extra hours, so I appreciate that. But no one has practiced emotional empathy to ask me, how am I now feeling? So you feel confused. Can you see that a lot of times people actually need all 3 types of empathy? I know it feels like hard work. I know some of you might feel it's not in your personality, but sometimes we've got a limited view of our personalities. It's amazing when we learn certain skills and so on, how it stretches us. There was a time when my wife was not feeling well, and she said to me, I'm not feeling well. And this was a number of years ago. And I said, okay, I'll cover everything. I'll cover the kids. I'll make a plan with the food. I'll do this. So I'm thinking I'm the hero and I'm helping out, right? I was showing her empathic concern. I'm here for you. Later on that evening, she said, my love, I don't know if you really know how I'm feeling. I don't know if you really understand how I'm feeling. And she started to describe how she was feeling. It's like there's this thing sitting on my head. And she started going into the detail. Of course, I got defensive because I'm thinking to myself, of course I understand how you're feeling. That's why I've been doing this. Fortunately, because I understood this principle, I was able to say, my love, do you know what's actually happening? What you need right now is emotional empathy. What I've been showing you is empathic concern. Can you see the difference? Okay? The dialoguing leader knows what type of empathy to practice, and it's great, guys, when you can actually do all three. I remember doing a particular seminar, and I literally had the team demonstrate the 3 different types of empathy to me in one sitting. The different personalities. I had a migraine. One person comes, oh, how are you feeling? Oh, where is it so? Another person showed me empathic concern, like the practical help. Here's an aspirin. Here's this. Here's that. Okay? And you know who you are, and you know what your tendency is when you're not feeling well. Some of you are the ones who show a lot of empathic or a lot of emotional empathy. How are you feeling? But you might not do anything about it. Others of you don't show emotional empathy, but you just say, Paul, it's that junk food you're eating. It's the preservatives in them. You should stop eating that. Here's an aspirin. And I'm thinking, okay, this person has helped me. They've given me medication. That's nice of them. But there's no... Okay. So when you practice this, you become a great dialoguing leader. It's important for me, this is a powerful affirmation, it's important for me to stop meetings from being dominated by specific individuals, and I'm comfortable doing this. The dialoguing leader is able to shape the conversation. They're able to draw out someone. You know those people who are good at drawing out someone who's quiet in a room, okay? So that they feel comfortable. The dialoguing leader is able to actually do that, okay? And you feel comfortable doing this. It's not difficult for you. You're not worried, what will the person think of me? No, you're more interested in the group and the process of dialogue than one person dominating the conversation. Okay? I steer meetings back in the right direction when they are starting to lose focus. I do this tactfully with ease. I'll be organizing, we've got cards that will be coming out on these 12 Ds, okay? So you'll actually be able to get these as affirmations that you carry around. Isn't that great, right? And you might decide, okay, I'm a dialoguing leader, and let me just begin to say these things as affirmations. I steer meetings back in the right direction when they're starting to lose focus. I do this tactfully with ease. What are some of the statements you can make? One of the things you can do basically is to say, okay, guys, I just want to remind us, I think it's really great, the passion in the room, but let's just focus. Remember, the purpose of the meeting is X, and you say it, all right? So there's a way of doing it where you're affirming the last speaker, but at the same time, you're keeping it focused. If you know that you're dealing with people who are ramblers, sometimes it's good for you to frame the meeting. So at the start, I did that in a men's meeting some time back. I knew there were some people who are long-winded, and what did I do? At the start, I said, guys, we've only got 30 minutes to have this conversation, or 40 minutes, so please don't be offended if I just say, noted, point taken, and then we move on, all right? It's much easier when you framed it from the get-go than trying to correct a situation once you're in the middle of it. It's a powerful skill to have. If you don't do this, remember, people are watching you in a meeting. And you know what they'll think? They'll be like, she's just as intimidated as we are by that character over there. Maybe because of the character's age, experience, or seniority. But if you are running a meeting, it's important to have this skill. It's also important to be able to do this even if you're not leading a meeting. What's one of the worst things at work? Meetings that go on for too long, right? Meetings as big time wasters. The problem wasn't the meeting. The problem was it was supposed to be done in 30 minutes, but 3 hours later we're still there. And then only after you've finished all your back-to-back meetings, you can start doing your own work. How many of you are feeling me on that one? Right? So what do? You don't just steer a meeting just because you're chairing it. The dialoguing leader is able to say, sorry guys, just help me to understand. Because when I was preparing for this meeting, I thought the focus would be this. But it seems like we're now talking about this. Sorry, can you just help me to understand? And then you allow the chair to chair. Or if they're not chairing properly, you make a suggestion. Guys, you know what? With everything that we're talking about, I'm starting to get confused. Can we focus on this, which was the purpose of the meeting? And this stuff is important because I can see we're passionate about it. Can't we have a separate meeting for this? Right? There's a way you propose it respectfully. Okay? Sometimes, depending on the situation, if there's a break, like a body break, you quickly go to the person who's running the meeting and you make the suggestion. Okay? What I also would encourage you to do, just remember that a good opportunity to shine in terms of your personal brand is actually running meetings. So when you master the art of being good at managing meetings, in my book, Crafted Conversations, it's one of the chapters, okay, on managing meetings. If you master that art with a powerful template, it's powerful offering to run certain meetings because you're taking charge of your life. Because when they're being run by some other people who don't know how to run meetings, then they're time wasters. So just say, guys, can I run it, please? Can I chair it, please? And then you do it. Then a meeting that was 3 hours is now half an hour or 20 minutes. Okay? I really seek to understand people, making sure that I don't cut them off when they're mid-thought or hesitating. That's an annoying thing, isn't it? Okay? Sometimes when you're sort of mid-thought and you're trying to express yourself and then someone just cuts in, whah, because you end up feeling like this person thinks they know me and they think they know what I'm going to say. Okay? For some people, that triggers them. So just know when to come in. If someone is really struggling and you need to sort of come in, then that's fine. But if you keep cutting in, people can feel rushed and they feel anxious. And when they're in an anxious state, you won't get quality out of them. When people are fearful, they don't give you quality. So just watch out for that. If this happens to you on the receiving end, there's someone always speaking like that to you, cutting in. Part of assertiveness is being able to say, sorry, I hadn't quite finished, and then you carry on. There's nothing wrong with that. What is assertiveness? I respect myself enough to stand up for my rights, but I respect you enough to do so respectfully. Does that make sense? It's not the same as being passive, where you're a doormat. You know? You guys are all okay, I'm not okay. Right? It's not the same as being aggressive. I'm okay, you're not okay. Assertiveness, I'm okay enough to speak up, you're okay enough for me to do so respectfully. Okay? I like to respectfully listen to people so I don't finish off their sentences assuming I know what they are going to say. I had an interesting thing. I was chatting to my wife the other day, and we were talking, catching up, and we had interactions with the same person at a particular function, right? And she first spoke to the person, and then I spoke to the person afterwards. So we're now exchanging notes. And at a certain point, I said to her, when she was about to update me, she said, so-and-so was telling me this. Then I said, yeah, I spoke to her. And then later on, she said to me, I don't know if it's okay for me telling you, because it seemed like the way you said, yes, I also spoke to her, you're basically saying I don't need to say anything because you spoke to her. And I said, no. You can say what you want to say, and then we can exchange notes. But I realized that the fact that I had said that shut her down. As opposed to sometimes actually just listening, because there might be things that were said, and they actually were things that this person said to my wife that they didn't say to me. And I can actually then learn more about that, okay? Sometimes it's useful to maybe press pause and just say, oh, did you also speak to her? In an enthusiastic way, not in a way that communicates, I haven't got time to listen, okay? I value the people I work with, so I like to listen to everyone in a meeting and not just a selected few. You see, there's what we call selective listening, and there are a lot of people who will only listen to certain people and not others, and it's very obvious. And often when I'm sitting as a coach in a session and I hear people starting to talk, you'll see they're glued when one person is speaking, okay? And then when someone else is speaking, it's like they've shut down completely. And that has an impact on the dynamic in the room. So just go in and help the marginalized. Especially if someone is quite junior, listen to them. Be fully present as they're speaking so that they feel valued. Remember, the job of a great leader is to create climate to boost people's self-esteem. Do it also with children. Don't just be a person where it's like, yeah, with grown-ups, that's when I really listen. And then when your kids are talking to you, there you are, Do you remember that man who once had his son saying, Daddy, listen to me? And this man was there watching basketball. I'm listening, son, I'm listening. And it was right near the end of the game. He was watching on TV. I'm listening. And then the son ended up saying, Daddy, listen to me with your eyes. And for a moment, this man thought, my son is confused about anatomy. Listen to me with your eyes. And then he realized that the son was communicating something much deeper. Okay? Our kids have challenged and rebuked us on that, that we're on our phones too much and we keep saying, it's work, it's work, it's work. But the fact of the matter is we can keep explaining that it's work, it's work, it's work. But did we have to send that information there and then? No. The dialoguing leader is someone who's fully present when they're speaking to you and when they're listening to you. They're fully there. Okay? Just remember, when you're speaking to someone who's shy and insecure, often if you look distracted, that reinforces it to them. They end up feeling like, yeah, you see, I'm not cut out for this. And they'll actually think they're the problem. You see, I'm boring. That other person, when he shares stories, it catches their attention. Now look, this person is looking away. You know those people, the moment you look a bit distracted, they're like, okay, sorry to keep you waiting, and then just disappear. So watch out for that. Okay? I have the patience to hear people out, even if I think I know where the conversation is going. That's a biggie, isn't it? Okay? Often we think we know the person, and we've got them in this box, and often it's a form of pride. Let me tell you something. That person you're talking to today, right? It's not the same person you're talking to last week. They've had new experiences. Rather, let them say the story again, and then you listen to them and you say, hey, afterwards, you remind them, and you say, oh, it's interesting, this time round you've gone into more detail because you told me the story last week, but you didn't tell me this aspect. See, there'll always be something different. I was irritated with my kids because lately they've been doing the opposite of this, okay? Where I start telling them the story. Yeah, Dad, we know. Dad, you told us the other day. You've already told us. Like, guys, come on. Honestly. I'm telling you again. Okay. I'm able to easily interrupt or hijack a dominating rambler by courteously helping them to focus their narrative. Now, how do you do this? This is a skill, isn't it? The way you do it is you agree with the person. If you're in a meeting and someone is rambling on, and they're not talking, don't stop talking, you literally hijack the conversation. So you then take over and you say, that's so true. I also experienced it. And then while you're the one talking, you then say, guys, I think we need to move on. Have you got something? Okay? That's one of the techniques you use, okay, with a rambler. All right? Sometimes if it's becoming distractive, you talk to them before the meeting and you say, listen, I know you're clued up and you've got lots to say, but I just wanted to, today, our strategy is to give some of the other guys quite a bit of a chance, to also talk. So can you just ask them questions? Can you play that role where you're the question asker this time round? You can do that kind of thing. This is very important in terms of a dialogue. Ladies and gentlemen, the trick is let's put all these principles into practice. Keep practicing them. Listen to the message again. Just give yourself little tests. Sometimes it's the 10-minute rule in terms of listening. Sometimes it's the 15 questions, feel-good questions to ask people. Use this, and it just takes you to another level as a leader. One of the key questions people ask me when I'm coaching them is, Paul, how do I influence people that don't report to me? This is so useful for this. It's for those meetings where you're meeting stakeholders, you're meeting a lot of senior people, various people, but they don't report to you. and there's the art of influence. Thank you so much. God bless you.